One of J. Smith's most frequent arguments against a historical false prophet named Muhammad is that he claims that the Quran is not written in the language that would have been spoken in the Hijaz, which is where Muhammad's life is traditionally placed. This ties into his claim that the Quran was created later on by the Umayyad or Abbasid Caliphate. Instead, he claims it is written in the type of Arabic that is called Nabatean Aramaic. In this video, you will learn why this is a ridiculous claim. But let's hear the claim from Jay's own mouth.
Now, we've been looking in the wrong area because we've been looking in the wrong language. And we've been looking in the wrong people. And we've been looking in the wrong place. Should have been going up north from the very beginning.
J. Smith is extremely clear that this dialect of Arabic is called Nabatean Aramaic.
They all have to say that this is from the place that Muhammad lived. This is from Mecca itself. This is the Qurayshi dialect. No, 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 no. This is not Qurayshi. This is not Sabaic. This is Nabatean Arabic. This is a much further northern Arabic. And back in those days, it was even more pronounced because you didn't have that much contact between the south and the north like you do today. So what's even more interesting, and this is what I think is, when you look at the Nabatean Aramaic, that is, and we call it a Nabatean Aramaic. We're going to talk about the Aramaic coming up later on when we get to the Quran. But the Nabatean Aramaic existed 600 miles further north, way up here. While the 7th century Arabic of Mecca, if there was any Quran written in the 7th century here in Mecca or in Medina, because those are the two cities that the Quran was supposedly written, both Mecca and Medina, it would have used the Sabaic from here.
He even claims that two scholars agree with him.
Al-Jalad, and this is where Al-Jalad has been really helpful. You know him, you've used him in your own research. And then also Mark Dury, you know him personally. I know him personally. He's a good friend. He has written about this, that there are some problems when you look at the Arabic here in the Quran. Because the Arabic in this book does not come from Mecca and Medina. That's the problem.
He said more on Al-Jalad in another video.
This Arabic, according to Al-Jalad, in his seminal work that he did in 2018, just 2 years ago, has pretty well delineated that the Quran, the Arabic that's in the Quran, is not from the central part of Arabia. It is certainly not Qurayshi. It is actually Aramaic, Nabatean Aramaic, from way up in Jordan.
Even more irresponsible is J. Smith's false claim that the language of the Hijaz should be Sabaic, but we'll get to that later. Let's see what papers Al-Jalad wrote in 2018. There are quite a few. Why doesn't J. Smith specify? Perhaps it is because if you go into Al-Jalad's work, you will find nothing that J. Smith claims is true. None of Al-Jalad's work from 2018 deals with the language of the Quran at all. In fact, in one of these articles, called The Earliest Stages of Arabic and Its Linguistic Classification, Al-Jalad clearly places Arabic as a sister language of the ancient South Arabian languages, which would include Sabaic, and the Northwest Semitic languages, which include Hebrew as a dialect of Canaanite, along with Aramaic and Ugaritic. They're sister languages with a common mother, but none comes from another. So the relationship between Arabic, Aramaic, and Sabaic is like the relationship between French, Spanish, and Romanian. They're sister languages, all descended from a common mother. Arabic doesn't come from either Sabaic or Aramaic in the same way that French does not come from either Spanish or Romanian. But it gets worse for J. Smith. In another 2018 article entitled, What is Ancient North Arabian?, Al-Jalad makes a family tree that includes different languages and dialects of Ancient North Arabian. Ancient North Arabian doesn't mean that the people who speak the language all live in the north. It means that these are found in writings that are in Arabia outside of Yemen. On page 34, Al-Jalad writes, It would seem that the language that we would identify as Arabic emerged sometime in the 2nd millennium. That is BC, in this region of the northwestern Hijaz and southern Levant, and then eventually spread across the peninsula, replacing its sister languages on a continuum of related Central Semitic languages. Evidence indicates the Bedouins around the settled people of Yemen were properly speaking Arabic before the end of the 4th century AD, so the replacement was complete more than 200 years before Muhammad was born. In fact, in Al-Jalad's diagram of Central Semitic, in which he classified several of the languages lumped together as ancient North Arabian, he places Old Hijazi as a dialect of Arabic that is apart from the Northern Old Arabic dialects, which include Nabatean Arabic, not the local dialect of Aramaic, but a dialect of Arabic. On this chart, Sabaic is still under the Old South Arabian language group, and Aramaic and Hebrew are still under the Northwest Semitic group. He even provides a handy map where he explains where several different languages and dialects are. See the Hijaz region? He calls the dialect Hijazi because it's spoken in the region of the Hijaz, which is where Medina and Mecca are. In contrast, he places the Sabaic language much farther south. Al-Jalad also wrote a paper on the Arabic of Petra in 2018. Petra was the capital of Nabatea. The Nabateans used Aramaic for writing, but a dialect of Arabic was also spoken there. He makes no claims about the Quran reflecting the language of either Aramaic or Arabic in Nabatea, and there is a reason for that. He has never claimed that it does. In fact, Al-Jalad has been a collaborator with Marin van Putten on understanding the language represented in the earliest Quranic manuscripts and decisively relating it to the Hijazi dialect of Arabic, not Petran Arabic, and not the Sabaic language. As you see, he was on the editorial board of Van Putten's book, Quranic Arabic, from its Hijazi origins to its classical reading traditions. Van Putten cites unique elements of the Hijazi dialect of Arabic. There are differences between some spellings that are seen in the Quran, which Al-Jalad and Van Putten argue reflect the Old Hijazi dialect, and the classical Arabic pronunciation of these words, which does not. These words must be pronounced as they are spelled, or else words that are supposed to rhyme don't rhyme. Not only does the Quran have this feature, but so do some ahadith. J. Smith appears deeply confused by the fact that the preferred script or alphabet style for all native Arabic writing by the end of the 6th century was adapted from the style used in Nabatea to write the Aramaic language. But the alphabet that you use doesn't tell you what language is being written. English is written using the Latin alphabet. That doesn't mean that English is Latin. The Kazakh language is a Turkic language, and it has been written using Old Turkic, Arabic, Cyrillic, and Latin alphabets. In fact, the country of Kazakhstan plans to change from the Cyrillic to the Latin alphabet. The Kazakh language did not become Arabic when Arabic script was used to write it. It did not become Slavic when the Cyrillic alphabet was used to write it, and it will not become Latin when the Latin alphabet is used to write it. In the same way, what we call the Hebrew alphabet came from an early Aramaic alphabet. Tradition states that Ezra directed that the scriptures be written using this alphabet instead of the more ancient Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. The Old Testament did not suddenly become Aramaic just because an Aramaic alphabet was used to write it, and over time the shapes of letters changed to become less like the original Aramaic alphabet and instead became the script that we call Hebrew to this day. In the same way, Arabic speakers changed from their own ancient North Arabian scripts to use a cursive form of the script used in Nabatea for Aramaic. Over time, Arabic writers changed the letter shapes so they weren't as much like the Nabatean script. Leila Nimeh documents this evolution in 3 stages that occurred before Islam. This borrowing did not begin in the Nabatean heartland, but rather around the ancient city of Hegra, which had been the capital of a Lyhianite kingdom that was conquered by Nabatea and made the capital of its new southern province in the 1st century BC, before Nabatea was itself conquered by Rome in AD 106. Petra was made into a provincial capital of Rome. It became entirely Christianized by the end of the 4th century, boasting a cathedral and a bishop's seat, with the last vestiges of paganism dying out. After the Romans took over, all governmental business was conducted in the Greek language and the Greek alphabet, and Aramaic inscriptions disappeared. The Petra papyri confirm that official Roman business was conducted in Greek, using the Greek alphabet in the ancient capital of Nabatea itself and its surroundings, even as there is evidence of Arabic being a common language among the people. In Petra, Arabic names and places are written only in the Greek alphabet. After an earthquake in AD 363, the Romans abandoned their fort at Hegra, which was a mere outpost by this time, and is out here in the small but historically literate town left behind, where Arabic, written in the Nabateo Arabic script, appears to have become the language of business and trade, developing eventually in the pre-Islamic Arabic script. By the end of the 6th century, the script had been adopted by all speakers of every dialect of Arabic that is attested outside of Rome's borders. It was used by the Gonessids, who were Roman clients, by the Lakhmids, who were Sasanian clients, and by the end of the 5th century it had traveled the entire length of the Hijaz and was being used by the Christians of the city of Najran in the Yemeni kingdom of Himyar before it was conquered by the Ethiopian Aksumites. So what does this mean? If something is written in Arabic in northern Yemen, in the Hijaz, in the Gonnesid kingdom, or in the Lakhmid kingdom in the 7th century, it will be written with the Arabic script that ultimately comes from the cursive used in Nabatea 500 years before. Therefore, the use of the script is no indication that a Nabatean is writing something, or that the writings are in a Nabatean dialect of any language, much less Nabatean Aramaic, which was extinct. Let's return to J. Smith's confusion about Sabaic.
The Arabic that was spoken in the Hijaz, where the Quran supposedly was created, is this Arabic, which is the big square that you see here, the big red square. That is known as Sabaic. That is from the Sabaeans.
Saba, and that's the kingdom of Saba, by the way, which is associated with Queen of Sheba.
Sheba, you're right. Which is way down south here in what is today Yemen and Sana'a. See where I'm pointing down here? That is where the Sabaeans are. That is where the Arabic comes from that would have been used up here in the Hijaz.
Remember that Sabaic is an old South Arabian language. It is not a dialect of Arabic. Literally no scholar at any time has made the claim that the people of the Hijaz spoke any old South Arabian language, not Sabaic and not any other. But how could J. Smith make such a strange blunder? Again, it comes down to alphabets. J. Smith is confusing script with language again, but it's even worse this time, because no language in the Hijaz was ever written with the scripts used to write the old South Arabian languages. Before the Nabatean script was used, the languages that are called Ancient North Arabian, including Arabic, were written in a number of similar-looking scripts. In fact, it's really these scripts that are called Ancient North Arabian, to distinguish them from the scripts found in Yemen. Al-Jalad points out that even though earlier scholars sometimes thought it was likely that the ancient North Arabian scripts came from the South Arabian scripts, this is actually unlikely. Of course, all these scripts ultimately come from the earliest Semitic script that was adopted from the Egyptian hieratic script, and these look more like that script than many other alphabets, but that doesn't mean that one comes from another. So J. Smith confuses a script that was no longer in use by the 6th century for a different script that a different language entirely was written in, and then the confusion of scripts leads to the confusion of languages. That's like saying that not only is a book written in 12th century German really Latin, but if it had been written in Germany, it would be written in ancient Norse runes. This is the level of dysfunctional reasoning that this statement betrays, but he says it with no self-awareness and complete confidence. Now imagine how you would feel if a Muslim came up to you and said that you're deluded because you think that the Old Testament's language is Hebrew, when it's really in Aramaic because the script is Aramaic, so the original language of the Old Testament was also Aramaic. You would find that person to be ignorant, ridiculous, or dishonest. But that's exactly what J. Smith is training Christians to do with Muslims by telling them the Quran is in Nabatean Aramaic. If that isn't enough, imagine someone insisting that the famous conquistador of Mexico, Hernando Cortez, is actually a Roman from the Italic region of Italy, because 2,000 years before Hernando Cortez was born, that's where people who spoke the ancestor of his language lived. When J. Smith cites Al-Jalad to back up his claims about Quranic Arabic being from the north, that is exactly the kind of claim he is making, applying origins in the 2nd millennium BC to events that took place 2,000 years later. J. Smith does not understand the material that he reads. He cannot explain it, much less evaluate it, and unfortunately he has been given a large platform to spread his confused message, which makes Christians look just as ridiculous as in the examples above. He should not be listened to, he should not be amplified, and he should not be teaching things he doesn't understand. This is not the only mistake in language that J. Smith has made. In this video, find out how he confuses Latin, Greek, Aramaic, Ugaritic, and Hebrew, muddying his teaching further by appealing to AI hallucinations as his authority.